Prologue. Sam Grinder Corin sat back in the striker's jump seat, looking up at the stars as they drifted slowly and steadily past his canopy. He sat for a moment listening to the dull familiarity of the hum of the striker's engines. Out here, away from the crowded hangar decks and the stink of recycled air, it was the closest thing to being back home. These brief moments of quiet, just him and the stars. It reminded him of cool nights out in the field, lying on a blanket looking up at the stars. It was almost peaceful. Almost. Peace was a lie, he reminded himself. Peace was just the thin pauses between chaos. He'd found himself chasing these pauses more and more over the years, though. The moments when the hum of the engines drowned out everything else. Out here, he didn't have to try to remember the names of pilots who would be gone at any moment. He didn't have to think about the letters that he'd long since stopped writing home, and the fact that he really should write to his mother. Out here, it was just the stars and the sound of the engines. He tried to stretch his legs, flexing the muscles to help with the blood flow as he cracked his neck and shook his head to stay awake.
One more hour.
Mara's voice crackled through his headset with a yawn on their element channel.
Any plans for next rotation?
He glanced out the right side of his canopy to where the other striker hovered in space, matching speed with his own.
Rinse, ration, rack.
He responded, keying his own mic.
Same as always.
Well, if it's the same as always, I expect you'll be skipping the rinse and doubling up on the rations again.
She replied jokingly.
What is that supposed to mean?
He snapped back indignantly.
I'm just saying.
She came back, and he could hear the smile in her voice.
Maybe you should add a few more R's to your vocabulary. That's all.
Like what exactly?
Oh, I don't know.
He could definitely hear the contained laugh waiting to come out and knew there was a punchline about to land.
Reps, run, resistance.
I don't see you hitting the gym any more than...
Contact! Contact! Contact!
Sam's eyes snapped to his display as his brain launched him into full alertness at the sound of the XO's voice on the squadron line. No new contacts were showing up, though.
Stealth contacts.
The XO, Lieutenant Commander Rhea Torch Valen's voice continued.
Focus sensors bearing 216-65.
His fingers were already flying across his sensor controls as she finished her instructions. The soft blue passive lighting of his display shifted suddenly into multiple angry red markers as his ship's targeting sensors refocused.
I count 12 fighters incoming.
He heard the XO calling out as data began populating on his display.
Iron Rain and Storm Riders Cap are inbound. ETA 10 minutes. QRF fighters are launching now and will actually be closer to us. ETA 5 minutes. Vigilant is repositioning to support. Blue Wing, form up on me.
Grinder copies.
Sam acknowledged and brought his ship around to form up with the XO's Hornet as she curved her ship out of formation to intercept the incoming enemy fighters. Sam watched the distance indicators on the incoming fighters. It was going to be close. His calculations had them coming into range before the rest of the Cap could arrive, but their attackers had not accounted for the Resolute's position, and the QRF fighters should be here in plenty of time. The XO suddenly barked out a curse.
One of the QRF fighters had a catastrophic failure taking off, and the remaining fighters had to deviate to avoid the wreckage. They aren't going to be here before we make weapons range.
Who was it, Torch?
Lieutenant Orion Brick Halvern asked apprehensively.
Gold 4,
Came the response.
Not sure exactly what happened.
Gold 4 was one of the rookie pilots they had just been assigned. Sam didn't even know her name, but now she was dead and had probably gotten all of them killed along with her. He gritted his teeth as he spared a glance at the disappearing gold blip on his display and swallowed. There was no time to spare thoughts for someone he didn't even know.
What's the plan, Torch?
Sam asked, keying his mic.
We're gonna open up the angle.
The XO's voice came back almost immediately.
They can't just blow past us, or they'll risk having us following them in when they meet up with the rest of the Cap. They'll have to adjust course to intercept. That should buy enough time for our backup to join us.
For the first time since the XO had called out the enemy contacts, Sam felt the knot in his chest loosen. Maybe, just maybe, they'd make it through the day. He knew better than to think thoughts like that, but it came to him unbidden. He instantly regretted it, though, as the idea had barely formed when the XO's curses ripped through the comm once again. His blood ran cold as he saw it for himself. A flicker on the edge of his display, a distortion where there should have been nothing. Then space itself seemed to tear open as an enemy subcraft flared to life where it had been pretending to be a hole in space. The striker's cockpit filled with warning tones, and the taste of copper filled his mouth as adrenaline coursed through his body. Over a dozen missiles erupted from the subcraft's tubes like a swarm of angry bees as they turned toward them.
New mission, Blue Wing. Form up on me.
The XO called out as soon as the missiles registered on their sensors. All 4 flaks, fighter light attack craft, readjusted their vector without hesitating. The fighters didn't matter now. The range to Resolute was too close. If they didn't do something about those missiles, odds were they could severely cripple the ship. This kind of ambush could only mean one thing.
All ships. New contacts coming out of FTL.
The voice of the Resolute CIC came over the fleet-wide frequency.
Carrier group designated Bogey 2. 4 escorts on sensors and fighters deploying.
Sam watched the indicators light up his display like a wave and gritted his teeth. None of those mattered, at least not to him, not right now. His immediate problem was the incoming missiles and getting the XO's Hornet to where she could do something about them with her point defense armament.
Here we go.
The XO called out as the enemy stealth fighters came into range and opened fire. There were more of them, but the strikers had the advantage of being more heavily armored and armed. Missiles erupted from both sides as well as countermeasures. Sam jerked the stick of his striker back and forth, maneuvering to evade as best he could while still providing cover to the XO. He felt a sense of jubilation as he watched 2 of the enemy fighters' indicators flicker and disappear from his display, but he didn't have time to enjoy it because they were now in gun range. He pulled the trigger and felt the jerk of his AVS autocannon erupting with fire as they dove into the enemy formation. To his satisfaction, he saw his target veer wildly off course, wreckage flying off one side of it.
I'm hit!
Mara's voice screamed over the channel. His eyes darted out the right side of his canopy where he saw the wing of her striker tearing itself off the fuselage as the ship drifted off course.
Eject!
He screamed into his mic, but it was too late. Her ship ripped itself apart as she tried to pull it back into formation. There was a brief explosion as oxygen and fuel tanks erupted, and she was gone. For half a heartbeat, he couldn't breathe. The shockwave rattled his canopy, her voice echoing in his mind. He blinked it all away in an instant with the grim reality of experience.
Whisper's gone.
He snapped into his mic and focused back on the task at hand. The incoming missiles were nearly in range, but the enemy fighters were already coming around. Several point defense missiles erupted from the XO's Hornet. Instantly, she corkscrewed for a new position as the enemy fighters opened fire again. Sam and Brick corkscrewed around with her, staying in formation. Sam registered the disappearance of 3 of the incoming missiles from his display without losing focus on his maneuvering as he continued to keep his striker between the XO and the attacking fighters. A pair of attackers passed too far in front of them. Brick twisted his striker around just long enough to shred the rearmost one's engine with a burst from his autocannon. Just as quickly, he twisted back into formation as another fighter swept in. Fire erupted around them again as the fighter passed through, and this time, Sam felt several thuds as rounds hit his ship. Warning lights flared across his console. One engine stuttered, its indicators flickering red for a brief second before stabilizing in the green again as it belched plasma into the void.
Ready countermeasures.
The XO called out, and the trio of fighters twisted around once more as they came around behind the missile barrage.
Deploy now!
The XO called as all 3 deployed their remaining countermeasures. The pursuing fighters fired wildly, but Sam knew their own displays would be going wild trying to identify the real targets. The ships leveled off for a moment, giving the XO's ship time to make lock. Then the XO's Hornet belted out a stream of PDMs.
Break, break, break!
The XO called out as the last PDM left its tube, and all 3 fighters split in different directions. Sam was pressed back in his seat as he flipped his striker end over end in a maneuver that would have made a less experienced pilot black out. As the nose of his ship came up, He accelerated back towards the pursuing fighters and fired into them. He gritted his teeth in satisfaction as he watched two of the fighters tear apart under the fire of his autocannon. He was out the other side again almost immediately, and the fighters scattered as they tried to pick up their targets. He checked his display and felt his stomach tighten. Two of the missiles had survived and were starting their kill runs on the Resolute's unprotected launch bay that was still spitting out fighters to engage Bogey 2.
I'm on him.
The XO said, having also gotten into position to evaluate her kills, and Sam flipped his striker around to come in behind her once again.
I'm hit.
Brick screamed suddenly.
I have to eject.
Sam was relieved to see Brick's life support beacon appear on his display just as his ship's IFF disappeared, indicating he had successfully ejected before his ship was destroyed.
On your wing, Torch.
Sam said calmly into his mic as he took up position.
Copy.
The XO responded.
Going for lock.
The two ships emerged from their maneuver and leveled off behind the remaining two missiles. There were no more countermeasures left to deploy, but they both knew there was no other option. Warning klaxons blared in Sam's cockpit as the ship's systems warned him of enemy lock. He didn't say anything to the XO, and she didn't give any orders. They both knew what had to be done. Neither would belittle the other by issuing an order or forcing the order to be made. His breathing steadied. The stick suddenly felt light in his hands. The hum of the engine seemed to fade into the distance. Time slowed. The alarms dulled to a heartbeat rhythm. He thought of Mara, of her laugh still lingering in his mind, of the rookies they'd trained and lost, of the quiet between the chaos where he had once found his peace. Maybe this was all it ever really meant, to hold the line for one more breath. He jerked hard on the stick and brought his striker flat out perpendicular to her Hornet and behind it, blocking her ship from the incoming fire for the seconds she needed to get a lock and fire. A hail of thuds sounded around him as the enemy fire rained in on him. He had just long enough to see her PDMs fly out and the enemy missiles disappear before his ship was torn apart.
The light of the striker's engines vanished, but for a brief second, a new star shone in the void. The chaos dwindled back into peace as Sam faded into the black.